All right, welcome back. Today's video is going to be on enhancing sexual connection in marriage. And this video is going to play off of the emotional intimacy video that we did recently and the physical intimacy video that we did recently, all in the theme of enhancing the connection in your marriage and how you can bring connection and attachment deeper into your relationship. So stay tuned. All right, so enhancing sexual connection in marriage. Now, if you haven't seen our recent YouTube videos on emotional intimacy and on physical intimacy, check those out. You're really going to enjoy those, and this video kind of builds on those principles and helps you understand a little bit deeper the roles of intimacy in relationships, and in this video, specifically the sexual connection and how that can be enhanced through strong intimacy. And I'm going to share with you today 4 tips on how you can enhance the sexual connection in your marriage. These tips are based off of interacting with thousands of couples all over the world who are working to deepen their connection in their relationship. And there's a few things that I've found that are really beneficial to couples when they can figure it out in their sexual connection. They can help bridge a stronger bond and connection in their relationship. So I look forward to sharing that with you today. And let's jump right in. Let's talk about that first tip. So enhancing sexual connection in marriage, here's your first tip. Learning your partner's recipe of sensuality, kind of like an erotic blueprint. So this is really important as you get to know your partner in marriage, to learn their erotic blueprint, to understand how sensuality works for them. Now, every person's a little bit different, which means how sexuality works for me is going to be a little bit different than how it works for my partner. And having a strong understanding of those similarities and differences between me and my partner are going to be extremely important. And if I'm going to communicate those differences to my partner, if I'm going to share with her about my sexuality and how sensuality works for me in our connection, I need to be able to have a high level of emotional intimacy with her, because that's a very vulnerable topic to get into. And as we talked about in our emotional intimacy video, vulnerability on that level, right, sharing those deep parts of me, it can be very difficult in relationships, especially if I haven't done a good job building that emotional intimacy on the lower levels in our relationship. So that emotional intimacy is really important to this conversation, because if we're going to have a fulfilling sexual connection with one another, we need to understand ourselves well, and then we need to be able to communicate about that with our partner. We need 2 individuals who are engaged in that learning process, who are intrigued in understanding how sexuality is experienced by both partners, and what are some of those things that we can do to build that erotic blueprint to help bring that connection easier and deeper and more connected over time, right? So building that erotic blueprint is extremely important in the beginning, and we want to be able to keep that in mind as we interact with one another in all the stages of sexuality, from building desire to arousal and excitement to climax and into the afterglow. We want to be able to understand how the sensuality thing works for our partner in each of those stages of sexual response. So knowing this erotic blueprint, understanding it well, and being able to communicate about it. Now, if you've had a difficult time exploring that for yourself, there's lots of resources out there that you can use. One of the first ones that I would encourage is our own video course on maintaining intimacy in sex, our Part 1 and our Part 2 video course, where we dive in a little bit deeper on how you can explore some of that and some of the steps you can take to communicate that with your partner. There's also a lot of other self-help books out there and resources that you can take a look at in understanding your own sexuality a little bit better and practicing communicating that to your partner. Our Advanced Communication Strategies video course can be helpful for that. Our Remember video course, our Enrich video course. These are all video courses that can help with some of that communication, learning that vulnerable communication and how you can share that in your relationship. Too many couples aren't talking about their erotic blueprint. They're not helping each other understand sensuality in their relationship. And it really can erode away at the connective power of that high level physical intimacy and relationship if we're not careful. So learning your partner's recipe of sensuality, that's our first tip. Our second tip is engaging mutual eroticism. So as we understand a little bit more what is helpful for my partner and what is helpful for me, we want to practice that in our sexual connection. As we have moments that we're able to connect with one another, trying to be mindful of each other, right? What are those things that I'm learning from my partner? How can I be sensitive to those? How can I nurture those in our interaction, right? How can I incorporate some of that into our sexual connection, helping that be mutual for both parties? Now, sometimes couples run into this problem that one of the partners in the marriage has a lower libido than the other. They don't feel as much drive toward physical connection, and particularly sexual connection, as their partner. And it can start to happen in their relationship that because of that, they want to be good to each other. And so the partner with the lower libido, the lower interest in sexual connection, can sometimes approach sexuality as kind of a service project for their partner. They want to show up for their partner. They want to create fulfillment sexually for their partner, but they start to see the sexuality as for their partner mainly. They don't need it as much, and so they don't really consider themselves in it as much. And their partner can start to see it that way too, right? That this is just something that we do in our relationship that's mostly for me. And when sexuality starts to get one-sided that way, sometimes there can be some problems in the approach, right? The partner that's on the receiving end of the intimacy can sometimes consider their partner less and less over time. And the partner that has the lower libido who's giving the sexual intimacy but doesn't really need it as much for themselves, sometimes they can start to frame the sexuality as mainly for their partner. Now, the reason that this is a problem is because if we start to frame the sexuality in our relationship over time in this manner, the intimacy of that sexuality can sometimes become eroded, right? It can be experienced more as a pleasurable experience for one partner from the other, right? In a service project type way. That doesn't really feel like connection and fulfillment anymore. It starts to feel like something to be maintained. And over time, the intimacy can be eroded. We don't want that, right? We want to maintain strong, intimate connection in the relationship. And that requires a strong physical and emotional intimacy in the relationship. And we want to be thinking about that in all levels of emotional and physical intimacy, including the sexuality at the highest levels of physical intimacy. Right? We want to engage that mutual eroticism, helping both enjoy this experience and learning to participate in this experience in a way that brings pleasure, happiness, connection, and fulfillment to both parties. That's where intimacy is meant to be in sexuality in a marriage. Okay, so the third tip is to create, don't just recreate, an erotic experience. Now, what I mean by create and not just recreate is sometimes going into marriage, partners will have ideas about sexuality, ideas that they picked up from their family experience growing up, ideas that they've seen in media or in movies, ideas that they've heard other people talk about, and sometimes ideas that they bring from previous marriages, right? So experiences they've had with sexuality with a previous partner that now they're bringing into this relationship. So wherever those ideas may come from, we want to kind of blank slate some of those. We want to kind of erase them for a minute and just focus on building a connection with the person who's right in front of you today. Now, some of that history and that experience can be good, right, in helping manage expectations, helping to understand pacing and how to build this connection with my partner. But a lot of those experiences need to be set aside while we build our connection. Sometimes we've had strong experiences in the past that we become so focused on recreating those that we forget about the person that's right in front of us. Understanding that strong, intimate connection with my partner is going to be built by learning my partner, not just by trying to recreate something I've experienced before. So we want your partner to be the one who's prized, and we want your partner to be the one who's focused on the most. You can get to a really strong connection and even surpass some of the connections you've experienced in the past if you're willing to be patient, if you're willing to nurture that relationship with your partner, if you're learning to understand them, right? To take things at a pace that's comfortable for them and to communicate well with them, you can build something glorious, right? So create an erotic experience. Don't just try to recreate. And the fourth tip, making opportunities for sensuality. Now, the reason I have this one in there is because life gets busy. And life gets busy with kids, life gets busy with work, life gets busy with bills, life gets busy with service in the community, right? All the things that are demanded of us. Life gets busy. And because life gets busy, sometimes the easiest person to sacrifice is my partner. And sometimes the easiest aspect of our relationship to sacrifice is our sexuality in the relationship. And when we do that, we're sacrificing the climactic experiences of physical intimacy. And along with it, sometimes goes out the window, our climactic experiences of emotional intimacy. If you'll remember those levels of intimacy that I went over in emotional and physical intimacy in those YouTube videos, you'll see that if we start to cut out that aspect of our relationship, the physical and the emotional, the high level intimacy experiences in the marriage, pretty soon the intimacy in our marriage gets pretty shallow. We have a hard time feeling strong connection with one another. So prioritizing and maintaining these high level intimate experiences emotionally and physically are extremely important, and life demands are the worst at getting in the way of those, right? So communicate with your partner, set up a schedule if you need to, or talk with each other about how to keep those times prioritized, right? It's vital to the health and the wellness of your marriage to maintain strong connection often. We want to make sure it's fed and that it's nourished, just like any other thing in our world that's going to stay strong. It's got to be maintained. So make that a priority in your relationship. Lots of couples come up with different ideas for this. Sometimes, like I mentioned earlier, they'll schedule certain days of the week that are good for setting apart for connection. Sometimes they'll schedule dates with each other. They'll get babysitters. They'll go out for an evening, or they'll go out for a weekend. Or sometimes they find little lunch breaks and things like that that they can use to connect with one another. Whatever it's going to be in your relationship, let's keep that alive. Let's keep that maintained. Now, as you're going through these 4 tips, if you find yourself longing for greater connection, but there's barriers in your relationship, either emotionally or physically in the intimacy of your relationship, the vulnerability is hard, right? Or connecting with the sensuality of sexuality is hard, or finding those moments to communicate is hard, right? Or even finding the words to express your thoughts, your feelings, that ends up in defensiveness and criticism easily in your relationship. Know that you're not alone. Difficulties with communication in relationships is the number one issue that couples find in marriage that are problematic, right? So don't feel bad. And guess what number 2 is? The number 2 most common difficulty that couples have in marriage is intimacy, right? Learning how to build strong emotional and physical intimacy. So we're talking about number 1 and number 2 of the most common things that are difficult for couples, right? So if this is a little bit hard for you and your spouse and your marriage, don't feel bad. This is very common. It's why we're talking about it, right? So engage a third party if you need to. Find a mental health counselor, reach out to a relationship coach, right? Call us. We're happy to be helpful. Maybe a clergy member, somebody that can provide you some spiritual counsel or advice, a trusted family member or friend, and even some self-help books, right? Look into resources that can help that communication and that connection occur. Your marriage is your most precious gift, right? Let's build it, and let's build your partner and your relationship to a stronger connection over time. So I hope these tips are helpful for you. Take a look at these tips and let us know in the comments which one is most beneficial for you. And if you have questions about any of these tips, let us know. We're happy to respond to those. Again, strong sexual connection is built on a platform of strong physical intimacy. We want to keep the intimacy in the sexuality, and sometimes couples lose the intimacy aspect of sexuality, and their sexuality suffers, right? So study up on emotional, physical intimacy. Let's keep your relationship strong, and let's support your relationship to a healthier place day over day. Thank you for joining us again today. Please like and subscribe, share our video content with others. We're on a mission to help couples everywhere, and we're grateful for the support you offer us along the way. I look forward to being with you again soon. Take care.